and she heard a woman calling her name. More accurately, she was screaming at it. Sydney! Sydney lifted her eyes from the laptop, looked through a glass office wall that faced the newsroom, and saw a tall, nimble woman zigzagging through the maze of cubicles. She was taking the corners with the deftness of a polo pony, as a security guard with a truck-sized spare tire chased her, and he was falling behind. As a reporter, Sydney had a sharp eye for details. The woman shrieking her name wore yoga pants and a Bruins sweatshirt, a knit cap over her chin, brown hair, and a mascara was bleeding down her cheeks. She looked determined and deranged. The woman, who appeared to be in her mid-40s, did not slow as she raced towards Sydney, open door. A moment later, the lanky woman was inside Sydney's office. Both hands planted on her desk, black-rimmed eyes fastened on hers. She shouted at Sydney, "I'm Kathleen Wyatt. KY, you remember?" Wyatt said. "I posted on your crime blog this morning. My daughter and her little baby girl are gone missing, and her husband killed them." Security guard, "Sorry, Miss Thomas." "You," he said to the woman who was leaning over the desk, "you come with me now." "Kathleen, are you armed? Be serious." "Stand by scene," said Sydney. "Kathleen, sit down." The guard said that he would be right outside the door and took position a few feet away. Sydney turned her attention back to the woman now sitting in the chair across from her desk, and ignored the inquisitive eyes of the writers in the newsroom peering through her glass office walls. "I remember you now, Kathleen. I had to take down your posts from my blog. They're gone." Sydney's publisher and editor-in-chief, Henry Tyler, leaned into her office. "Everything okay, Sydney?" "Thanks, Henry, we're fine." He nodded, then tapped the face of his watch. Sydney nodded in acknowledgement of the 6 o'clock closing. Her story about a shooting in Tenderloin. Henry had a word with Scene, and then closed the door. Sydney turned back to Kathleen Wyatt, saying, "You accused a man of murder and used his real name. The rules are right there on the site. No vulgarity, name-calling, or personal attacks. He could sue you for defamation. He could keep the Chronicle in court until the next ice age," Wyatt said. "You come across as such a nice person, Sydney, but like everyone else, you're all about the money." "You are doing it again, Kathleen. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The woman folded her arms over Sydney's desk, dropped her head, and sobbed. Sydney thought Kathleen Wyatt seemed out of her mind with fear. Sydney said, Kathleen, do you know for a fact this man murdered your daughter and granddaughter?" Kathleen lifted her head and shook it. "No." Sydney said, "Another question. Have you called the police?" This time, when Kathleen Wyatt raised her head, she said, Yes. "But have they found the baby?" "No." While Kathleen Wyatt dried her eyes with her sweatshirt, Sydney retrieved the post she'd deleted this morning and read it again. Kathleen had written about her son-in-law, Lucas Brooke, using all caps to shout that Brooke had abused her daughter, Tara, and that he'd even been violent with their baby, Lori. Kathleen had written that she was terrified for the both of them and trusted her gut. Sydney had seen the post a few minutes after Kathleen had submitted it. The screaming capital letters, the misspellings, and the nature of the posts uploaded on her news blog made the posters sound crazy or like a troll. Now Kathleen had told Sydney the story to her face. Her credibility had risen. But damn it, Sydney couldn't know if Kathleen was being paranoid or in an understandable panic that her loved ones could be in danger or worse. Her fear was relatable and the idea of murderous husband plausible. It happened too often, and that it may have happened to Kathleen. Posted her cry this morning made Sydney feel awful and guilty, and still there was nothing that she could do. Kathleen slapped her desk to draw Sydney's attention. Her voice was rough from yelling, but it said, "I called the police as soon as I couldn't locate Tara, and after you called the police once or 3 times, you have to beg them to pay attention. But I did. My daughter's 20 now, an adult. The cops called in a canine unit, put out an Amber Alert on my granddaughter, or so they say. It hasn't come through on my phone." Sydney said, "The missing baby. What'd you say? She's a year old?" "Closer to a year and a half. They're looking for her." Kathleen reached into her fancy pack and pulled out a picture of a mother and a child. Tara was brunette like Kathleen, and Lori was a redhead. They both looked very young. Lori was 16 months old to be exact. "My daughter is always home all day with the baby. I went over there and the house was empty. Her car was gone. I've called her, and we always speak in the morning, but Lucas has gone to work. That baby could be dead already if you'd run this picture in the paper 6 hours ago. I'm a reporter, Kathleen. I need confirmation. You must know that. But still, I feel sorry. Don't you dare tell me how sorry you are. Sorry won't help my daughter. Sorry won't help her baby girl." "Sit tight," Sydney said. She reviewed her story about the shooting in Tenderloin, changed a few words, and then rewrote the last line, "Kicker." She addressed an email to Tyler, attached to her story, and pressed send. Deadline met. Sydney turned back to Kathleen. "No promises. Let me see what I can do." Sydney speed dialed the number, then drummed her fingers on her desk until Lindsay picked up. "Boxer. Linz, I need some advice. It's important." "What's wrong?" "No, I'm fine. Can you give a couple of moments to a woman with a missing daughter and granddaughter?" "Me?" "Thanks, Linz. I'm putting you on speaker. I'm here with Kathleen Wyatt. I'll let her tell you why." "Kathleen, this is Sergeant Lindsay Boxer of homicide," Lindsay said. "Kathleen, what happened?" "They've disappeared into a black hole." "Say again." Kathleen said, "My daughter Tara and her baby disappeared this morning, and her husband has threatened to kill them. You say they disappeared. Is there any indication that they were hurt?" Kathleen paused before answering. "Tara has run away with the baby before." "From her husband?" "Tara has told me, I don't know how many times, that he's said that he hates her. He hits her, but not so it shows. He wishes Lori had never been born. And yes, I've called the police." Lindsay asked, "Had Tara taken out a restraining order on Lucas?" "She wouldn't do it. She's only 20. She's too young, too dumb, too needy. She doesn't work. She's afraid of him. And also, oh God, help her. She loves him. At 17, she begged me to consent to their marriage, and God help me, I did." Horns honked over the phone line. Lindsay was in her car. She raised her voice over the clamor and asked Kathleen, "What was the police response?" "Today, they say they talked to Lucas, but he had an alibi. A girlfriend, probably. You should see him smooth as ice. He denies threatening them, of course. They have some units searching, and they have dogs now in the vicinity of the house, and drones, and they say Tara will come home. And Lindsay, if I may, I really think it's too late." The words "too late" tailed up in her throat into a wrenching howl. Kathleen was crying, as if she were sure they were dead, as if she knew. The security guard reached for the door, but Sydney put up her hand and shook her head. Lindsay said finally, "Who was the officer who took your report?" "Bernard. Officer Bernard." "Okay, Kathleen," Lindsay said. "I'll check with Officer Bernard. Give Sydney your number and I'll get back to you. If a baby has been missing since 8 this morning, that's a police matter. Call the SFPD and ask for Tom Murray in major crimes. He's the head of missing persons. Keep your phone charged." "I've met Lieutenant Murray," Kathleen said. "He doesn't take me seriously." I'll call him too, said Lindsay. "See how the investigation goes." She broke off, Sorry, I've got to go. Sydney said goodbye to Lindsay, watched Kathleen write down her phone number with a shaking hand, muttering, "You should help me, Sydney. Lori is dead. I can feel it in my heart." Sydney said, "It's almost dark. Go home and call the police again." "Did you call Tara's friends? What about her neighbors? If you hear anything at all, let me know." "Wait, let me see that picture again." Kathleen handed the picture of Tara and Lori to Sydney, who snapped it with her phone. She told Kathleen that she could run it with the request for information as to pair whereabouts without mentioning Lucas Brute. Tugging at her watch cap, Kathleen muttered a thank you as Sydney walked her out to the elevator. Sydney walked back to her office, wondering why Kathleen Wyatt had come to her. Was she right about her son-in-law, or was Kathleen Wyatt just paranoid? I'd been at my desk since 7 Tuesday morning. It was now 8:30. I wanted to get some answers for Kathleen Wyatt before 9 a.m. All hands meeting Lieutenant Jackson Brady's had called. As the mother of a daughter myself, I had felt an extra urgency. My partner, Inspector Richard Coughlin, and I sit at a facing desks at the front of a dull gray homicide bullpen. He'd just arrived, but when Rich heard me talking to Lieutenant Murray over the phone, he went to the break room to get a coffee. Rich knew I was doing a favor for Sydney. When he got back to his desk, I thanked Murray, hung up, and Coughlin pushed a fresh mug of mud over at my desk. It was black, 3 sugars. Just how I like it. "Boxer, what did Murray say?" "He said Lucas Brooke is a bad dude, but he doesn't think he's a killer." "How bad?" I blew on my coffee, then referred to my notes. "Last year, Lucas threatened a female motorist after a fender bender grabbed her shoulders and called her names and shook her. He was taken in for assault and battery, but the motorist didn't press any charges. A few months later, Lucas took a chainsaw to a neighbor's tree. He claimed it was on his property. It was not. He got fined $800. End of that. Then Kathleen reported him for domestic abuse of her daughter. But Tara denied it," said her mother. "She was nuts. Kathleen is a little loosely wrapped, which makes her hard to read. But it's also true that abused women often deny the abuse. Anyway, that's Lucas Brooks' record. He's at least combative." I called Sydney and sipped coffee while Rich walked over to the Sergeant Cappy O'Neill's desk, sat on the edge of it, and traded what-ifs with him. As Sergeant Paul Chi, I could hear them opening on the upcoming meeting, but there was a little controversy. We were all of the same opinion. Brady was going to announce his future plans, but what had he decided to do? The root of the matter was a scandal that had devastated the South Station, our station, not long ago. Lieutenant Ted Swanson of robbery had enlisted 2 teams of bad cops to knock off drug dealers and payday loans joints for cash. 18 people died in several shootouts, and even Swanson took enough lead to kill him 2 or 3 times over. But he survived his injuries and now was serving out the rest of his worthless life in Chino, a maximum security prison. Warren Jacoby, our friend, my former partner, and at the time chief of police, had to take the fall. He was retired out, and Jackson Brady, our good lieutenant, picked up the slack for Jacoby simultaneously, running homicide and the Southern Station. When asked to choose which job he wanted, he'd put off the decision. Maybe took too long. Lately, rumor had it that the mayor was having talks with Stefan, a heavyweight organized crime commander from New York. I loved working for Brady. He was smart. He never asked anyone to do anything. He wouldn't do it, and he was loyal to the people who reported to him. What scared me the most was that the rumor might be wrong, that Brady was going to step up to become the chief of police, and the hard New Yorker would replace him as homicide CO. Maybe a promotion would be good for Brady, but speaking for myself, it would break my heart. Hey, I just want to thank you all for watching, and if you would like part 2, make sure you subscribe. This is my first video, so it's a little finicky, but I do hope you all enjoyed, and bye-bye.